Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 118th New Social Environment Lunchtime Conversation. I'm JC, and I have the privilege of being your MC today for a conversation between Rico Gatson, painter, and Tom McGlynn, editor-at-large and painter. We're also thrilled to have the poet Don Yorty here, who will read to close today's program. The Brooklyn Rail would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Lenni Lenape, the Canarsie, the Shinnecock, and Munsee peoples. We acknowledge that many indigenous nations with ties to this land, and we recognize that the Lenape still call Mannahatta home. Finally, the Brooklyn Rail stands in solidarity with the uprising continuing to unfold across the country following the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Nina Pop, David McCatty, James Scurlock, Jamel Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, Ray Melton, Dominique Remy Fells, Toyin Salau, and in response to generations of structural violence against Black communities. Black Lives Matter, and we will continue to support the ongoing action in the struggle for racial justice. Before I introduce our host and guests, we'd like to begin with a brief moment of silence. Thank you. And now to introduce today's host and guest. Over the course of almost 2 decades, Rico Gatson has become celebrated for his confrontational and politically opinionated artworks, often based on significant moments in Black history. Images of riots, fires, and confinement pervade his works, which have touched on a range of subjects like the Watts Riots, the presidential election of Barack Obama, and the formation of the Black Panthers. As Gatson once said, "I'm always interested in seducing the viewer and hitting them on the way out, allowing a delayed response to powerfully charged content." He works across media, and we are very excited to have him here today. Briefly, Tom McGlynn is an artist, writer, and independent curator based in the New York City area. His work is represented in the permanent collections of the Whitney, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum of the Smithsonian. He is an editor-at-large of The Rail, contributing articles and criticism since 2012, and his most recent show of paintings opened this February at Rick Wester Fine Art in New York City and was closed due to COVID. It will reopen by appointment. It's currently reopened by appointment until September 19th. And he was awarded a residency at the Sharpalentis studio program. Tom, over to you.
Welcome to everyone, and especially to Rico. I'm really excited about talking to you about abstraction and subjecthood and objecthood and all those great things that we painters like to talk about. Hopefully in the abstract and in the solid as well. I think, Catherine, why don't we start off with Southern Comfort, Rico's earliest painting in the slideshow? And maybe Rico, you can introduce the genesis of the imagery of this abstract painting.
Yeah, I will. I just want to say thank you to Fong and the Brooklyn Rail and to Tom for interviewing, and for everybody who's worked on this, and just to say I'm delighted to be here. And I just want to point out very quickly again, which was emphasized at the end of John's introduction, that I am an artist that works across media. I don't especially like to say that I'm a painter in the pure sense of that, maybe working towards it, and maybe that's something that we can delve into a little bit. But I work across media, obviously, video, film, and I studied sculpture and still do produce objects, not as much as the painting at the moment, or as I like to refer to the work sometimes as painted things. But this particular work that we're looking at, I would say, is very early in this development of, me is beginning to think about things that are on the wall, 2D works. It's described Southern Comfort, and I was thinking about a lot of things, some of which I'm not going to get into in this format, but in particular, thinking about the way that information can be like coded or sort of put into something, but not necessarily like in a way that's obvious from the outset. So Southern Comfort is a very sort of loaded title. The painting is 4x6. It's acrylic paint on wood panel, and it has like dots that I was using. I laid out the base and grid, but I should say that the layout of the painting is like the Confederate flag, and but then I laid it out, and then I wanted to sort of obscure the layout of the flag with like these stripes, and I was thinking a lot about like for whatever reasons that don't fully come to mind right now, but thinking about Albers a lot, you know, not in the literal sense of that, but so yeah.
So, you know, we had this discussion a little bit when we met earlier, and it brought up, you know, I wrote some stuff after that I thought might be relevant to how, say, like the Confederate battle flag permutates in the historical mind as a schema, you know, and then what you did with the schema by abstracting the schema, somehow retaining, you know, the format in memory, but changing it in a way. So I think there's something to this idea of abstraction as schema, but also admixed with a history of symbolism. You and I had talked about the fact that neither one of us believes that there's such a thing as pure abstraction. But I think starting with the Confederate flag is a very loaded place to start.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, you know, there's clearly like in one's career or one's progression, I should say, there's I guess where I'm going with that is that it's not it doesn't come out of the blue. There's like a progression, and like obviously I was thinking about like the subject matter, and it was consistent in like that group of work, that body of work, put more specifically. So a lot of the objects, some of which we'll see in this presentation, were all related to like history, but this idea of abstraction and subjectivity is something that's been consistent. You know, I was also, I'd also made some not so good paintings. Like, I think this is like probably one of the more successful ones in that group of early attempts at trying to utilize really loaded symbols. I did some paintings that of swastikas and various other sort of symbols associated with some of these like white supremacist groups, and trying to like tease out, maybe not tease out, but trying to play with like the symbols, you know, like the way that they've been like sort of co-opted, like clearly like the swastika, trying to unpack, I think is a better word, like the symbols, you know, and thinking about like, you know, co-option or the way that symbols like can be transformed and meaning can be transformed and shifted. So like it's, you know, yeah, it was tough work to make, you know, but the work prior to that was more performance based, just a few years prior, was even tougher to make, where I was doing things, and even harder to look at right now, because like just given everything that's happening, but it was like early where I was doing things like utilizing like just the you know, the cloak of the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan. So there's a little hint. It's not just coming. It doesn't just start, but
right.
At this point, but it's there. So there's, you know, like I think that as makers, I think we try to sort of, as artists, you know, which I like I like to consider myself an artist more than like anything that it is that I might do, painting or object making or films. So, but the idea being that there's this thing that's there that is not necessarily obvious, and it's sort of like cloaked, in the language of hard-edged abstraction, so to speak.
Yeah,
So,
I like to think about like how one can adopt the schema of a previously loaded symbol as, I like to think about it as using the kind of rhetorical power of that symbol and turn it against itself, or just using the rhetorical power as pure rhetoric or something, not pure abstraction, but, and when I was thinking about this particular painting, I was reminded of the Stella paintings that the art historian NSE critiques in her piece, Minimalism and the Rhetoric of Power. And there were 3 paintings that he did in the Black painting series that were referring specifically to like Nazi symbolism. One was called De Fan Hoc, which is the flag on high, which was referring to a Nazi anthem. Another one was Arbeit macht frei, which we all know the origin of that. And I forget the third one, but the argument that he would make back then is that, he was just trying to like oppose meaning against meaning. But, these days it becomes a very troubling kind of appropriation, the rhetoric of that power is not theoretical historically at this moment.
yeah.
And, so I guess my point is like his irony in just doing this like sheer appropriation of like Nazi imagery or Nazi titles is different than your irony, because your irony is it's kind of it's more it's not just disinterested as his might have been like perceived back in 1959, but it's more intentionally like referencing a historical code that you're trying to deturn or turn over or reuse in a way that exposes the actual rhetoric of that symbolism.
Yeah, I guess so. I can hear myself echo. It's a little distracting. I think that I think that one of the things that I've sort of been interested in, and is I think that again maybe started with some of this work. It's not always clear, but I would say that like this, for me, like there is something that is kind of playful. I mean, it's a sort of a serious sort of play, but I use that term just to kind of like redirect this to the idea of like taking license. Like there's a license that one gives oneself when one's sort of playing, and trying to sort of like, again, like, like take the symbol, it's not just about subverting it, but it's also about like trying to like, I guess I suppose to subvert the power of the symbol, and maybe we can get into that a little bit more as we go farther into some of the other works.
Sure. Maybe Catherine, we could move to the next few slides.
Yeah, like this for instance, which is titled Whipping Post Medium, and there was one other object that was larger, and it was literally titled Whipping Post Large, 2006. And whenever I give this my presentation, I usually have like supporting imagery. So like clearly a whipping post is a reference to like a device that was used, during slavery to punish, people, to whip them. And so, it's a stockade, so I like again, with this, this trying to sort of create a reason to sort of produce something, you know, and there's a bit more backstory to like this body of work, but it was primarily like thinking about like these objects and symbols, thinking about like, you know, the difference between like painting and object making, or painting and sculpture, and trying to sort of like create a body of work, you know, having, you know, attempting to work through like, you know, whatever it means to sort of like delineate oneself is either or and beyond. But I decided to create this whole body of work, painting and sculpture, in the same color scheme, which, you know, the colors again approximate the colors of the Confederate flag, but not specifically, you know. So, but, you know, it became this kind of humorous gesture, slightly humorous. I don't know how humorous it ultimately is, to sort of like kind of create this sort of camouflage with an object like this, because it's pretty obvious what it is, you know.
I do think, you know, as a painter myself, like as an artist, you know, somebody who appreciates poetry, that the playful aspect of it has nothing to do with humor necessarily. You know, it has to do with license.
Like it has to do with what?
License, you know.
Yeah.
Like self-license, you know. Often.
But the humor. I mean, it's you know, it is licensed, but the humor is kind of dark, but it's dark, you know, set against like the absurdity. Right. And I think that we're all kind of seeing that now. We're seeing like just sort of like kind of how somehow like the veil has been lifted, and I think that I was thinking about this then, like the absurdity of like clinging to like histories, this history that's been so, for lack of a better word, repugnant and dark, and it's just affected people. Like, you know, it's almost like I was thinking about like this kind of, you know, which is consistent, this notion of hidden in plain sight. Like, you know, like most people wouldn't even talk about what it was. I always feel it's a little bit humorous to kind of explain to people. I mean, it's pretty obvious what it is, but like we still haven't adopted or figured out a way, maybe we are now, to talk about like the history of like slavery and like that, you know, the darkness of it. But it's not a history lesson. It's not like sort of, you know, an attempt to be, you know, preachy.
Right. Well, you know, I think with the history of abstraction, there's always this interplay between explicit meaning and implicit meaning. And, you know, with implicit meaning, there's an appeal towards universality. And with explicit meaning, there's an appeal to realism, or, you know, like just telling it like it is, you know. You know, I was thinking about the contemporary symbol of, I was having this conversation just yesterday with some friends about the Blue Lives Matter flag.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking about unambiguous abstractions, you know, in the present. And we had this whole conversation, is like, why is it black and white? Why is the flag black and white and there's only one blue line? Well, obviously the blue line is the thin blue line, right? Representing the police. But we kind of came upon the assumption that the black and white has to do with kind of like black and white thinking, you know? And so it's actually very sophisticated symbolism that is delivering this white supremacist, you know, control, society of control. So we're dealing with these abstractions in the present.
It's funny. It's funny you bring that up, because I was talking about this, having a conversation on a trip upstate that I took this weekend, and was seeing the flag. I mean, this is like two separate kind of strains of thought. But I was in the car with my lovely wife of 28 years, and I was driving through these towns and seeing the flag, seeing that flag and processing it and not really know. I mean, you just explained to me what that flag is. I was sort of like musing, like what does that flag represent? For whatever reason, I didn't get the memo. So, but yeah, but that's interesting.
Sophisticated, you know, it's like sophisticated coding, you know.
Well,
I mean, it's not sophisticated in its message, but you know, it's actually incredible design. You know, I'm not lauding the message or the design, but I'm just saying, for some reason, the right seems to have co-opted like a regime of propagandistic aesthetics.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is I was looking at it and I was attracted to it, you know. But I think that like attracted just from a design standpoint,
right?
And just from a, you know, just being a visual person and thinking like, you know, literally thinking again without fully understanding what it was, other than just kind of, you know, musing about what is that? You know, what is that? You know, because I'm thinking a lot about flags lately because I'm making these flag paintings again, and they've been consistent throughout the work. But so, you know, but yeah, I guess that's the point, is that like, you know, it's like I was making this work and work prior, again, thinking about like just the pageantry and sort of like the aesthetic of like, you know, white supremacy, like historically, and how attractive it can be, how maybe not attractive, but seductive,
right? Yeah.
It is. You know, I mean, we just, you know, I was struck at the convention last week, the Republican National Convention, with, you know, struck by how sort of, for me, how interesting, like the, and like sort of the strict, rigid display of those flags, the crispness,
right?
You know, and like how, like, you know, clearly that works to sort of, you know, yeah. So like, yeah, so I'm in agreement, but I'm also thinking about like the way that like sort of colors function symbolically, which is something that is, you know, that is the feature of my work, like the black and white. I'm always thinking about black and white, not in the ways, not in the terms that you described, you know, but in more literal terms, like, you know, I guess it's consistent because it's like the thinking, but it's also like literally, like the focus is always insofar as I think the narrative is concerned in like the black and white, you know, in this like black and white sort of processing, you know, like black and white people, like this sort of divide, whereas, you know, things are a lot more sort of, you know, complex.
Right, it's a polemical, it always devolves to a polemical discussion, you know, like a binary, a dialectic that's oppositional, which, you know, I had this conversation earlier with Donald Odita about, you know, about color and about, it's kind of like an Albers thing, you know, color is, there's no such thing in one sense as black and white, you know.
Exactly.
The spectrum doesn't really contain it. I mean, obviously we know there's black and white, but you know what I'm saying? It's like the relativity of the spectrum is always changing. And it's more, you know, the symbolism of that flag is more about binary thinking and about oppositional polemics that, you know, frankly, Trump is good at ginning up.
Exactly. But I mean, the power of I almost like that flag better than the actual American flag, to be honest, weirdly enough. I mean, just not in the literal sense.
No, I know.
Just bear with me, audience.
Who would?
As I attempt to sort of, you know, but, you know, because I think that there's something maybe, like, given what's been described, is something that, you know, ultimately has the potential. Like, I mean, these are very complex, and I use the word complex as opposed to, you know, complicated, because I think that it achieves a, you know, much richer thing, you know, but these are very complex conversations that we're attempting to have, that we're always attempting to have, you know, in this country, you know, around some of these issues, you know, and I'm like, you know, in and out of them all the time, you know.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to talk about your sculpture here, the next slide?
Yeah, usually in my slide presentation, I show, again, some source imagery just to sort of beat home the idea, but I think the title can sort of like maybe describe what's happening best. It's titled Auction Block 2006. You know, so I was literally thinking about, like, you know, both the auction block, you know, and as it relates to, you know, slavery and the and bodies, Black bodies being sold into this bondage. But I'm also thinking about, like, you know, entertainment, you know, and some of these sort of kind of, you know, really tricky Faustian deals that people get into, you know. And I've been talking a little bit lately about, like, as a for instance, like Prince, when he had an issue with his record label, and he changed his name to the artist formerly known as, and at some point I believe he even wrote like slave on his face to, you know, illustrate with great impact the point. So, but I'm thinking, like, you know, like vaudeville, show business, but also like, you know, performance, spectacle, you know, this kind of pageantry. But who is it? Felix Gonzalez. Who is it that I'm also thinking about that artist that did the stage. Remember the stage?
Felix Gonzalez Torres. Yeah. He did the go-go dancer stage.
Yeah, the go-go dancers. That is, for some reason, that sculpture that I believe was produced in the late '80s. You know, there's a lot of resonance there for me. That so.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful piece, and I love the deep structural irony that you're using, and the different layers of association with like other artists, like vaudeville, the spectacle. So the viewer doesn't really come to any easy conclusion with the work. I mean, you're problematizing things on a lot of different levels.
Yeah, which sometimes
I think it's a great thing, you know.
Yeah, I want, you know, it's like an invitation to come in, you know what I mean? And it's like, once you're in, it's like, what are we dealing with here?
Right.
You know, but then it's also like, you know, easy access out, you know? So, but hopefully, as described, I mean, I would describe that description that was very nicely read by John early, or differently now, that, you know, it's, you know, but I do want there to be this kind of slow, I like to talk about slowness, you know, and, or fast and slow, like this fast read of, you know, again, formally what's present, but then there's like this slower kind of sort of read, or sort of dissemination of like maybe some of the things, you know, and it may be the case that sometimes it's not, nothing is achieved or received. You know, I mean, I hope not, but no, but that gets into some other areas of kind of thinking with the work, like in particular with some of the newer work. But you know, yeah, just change the slide when I get rambly. Start rambling. It helps.
It's all good, man.
No, I'm having a good time. It doesn't look like it, but I'm having a great time.
The easy in is interesting. You know, it reminds me of like when we're driving on the highway, it's like easy on, easy off. You know, like I don't want to go 2 miles into some uncharted territory to get gas. You know, but like with pop art, with pop symbolism or like pop references or pop appropriation, that's what it does. What pop appropriation does, even in an attenuated form, in kind of like a minimalist abstract form, is it allows the viewer to enter in kind of with ease, because there's this generic schema that they're comfortable with. You know, they're already comfortable with. And I talked to Stanley Whitney about this too. He said exactly the same thing. He said, there's a point of entry that I want, you know, the viewer to be easy in, you know. So it's so interesting to hear you say that too.
Yeah, I want to just respond by saying, first and foremost, that I'm a huge fan of Stanley Whitney and his work, on the record. And
he's a wonderful artist.
Amazing artist, yeah. And but yeah, you know, it's like at some point, you know, I kind of made the determination with the work that, you know, that it's my role as maker is not to sort of, again, pound the viewer over the head, you know. So I think the impact is greater when it's, you know, when there is this sort of invitation, not easy access, but just like, you know, an invitation in, you know, and then like, you know, and hopefully an opportunity for like true dialogue. I mean, just look at us, you know. I mean, it's kind of absurd that where we're at in the midst of this pandemic, you know, and this country, you know, being so like torn and like torn up and like incapable of just sort of, you know, all the you know, all the terms, buzzwords that we hear, you know, all the tribalism and struggle to sort of like just have a conversation, you know. And I think that like that's like the, you know, it's not agreeing. This is what I was talking to my wife about. It's not like, you know, my partner. It's not about like, it's like agreeing to disagree. And I know that sounds really cliche, but I think that somehow we have to sort of achieve that. But I know that we're just not willing to, because it's just like the nerve is exposed, you know. But it's like hope.
You know,
yeah.
It is a completely absurd situation, and it's not even like one that you could make work out of necessarily. I mean, maybe you can.
You could attempt it.
You know, well, yeah, of course, you know, but you know, like you run into situations where I ran into a situation yesterday when my wife and our friends were walking on a trail, and this person who didn't have a mask on, who was riding by quickly on a bicycle, they made a point of telling us, "Oh, I'm so glad you're being healthy," you know. And you know, I was like, "What just happened?" You know, is this really happening? Is like somebody really taking the time to redress me for like thinking about their health? You know, I mean, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but we know what's happening, you know, and it is a very extraordinary time.
Yeah, truly.
Do you want to talk about this piece, Rico?
Not really. No, I'm joking. Yeah, this is a group of objects that I made in 2009 titled Magic Sticks. And one of the things that started to occur after the 2006 with succeeding work is I started these small series. And this is probably the first in that series, you know. And I don't think I'm making these anymore, but it's a sculpture made in wood of mostly reclaimed, repurposed wood, stuff that was like by the dumpster. And at the time in 2008, I first went down to New Orleans for Prospect 1, which is the New Orleans Biennial, and was spending a lot of time there. I mean, not a lot, but I spent enough time there. It was, I think, organized by Dan Cameron at the time. And I don't know, I was just thinking about like, you know, history, African religion, you know, the Catholicism, and then like voodoo, you know, or again, African religion, you know, and this is all kind of swirling around in like maybe not such a sort of non-specific way, but I was kind of thinking about like the serpent, you know, like like Moses' staff, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and but then like the serpent and voodoo, but then also like it's a play on like the, you know, the expression or the magic stick, you know, like I think it was like the Little Kim song. It's either Little Kim or 50 Cent, you know, my magic stick, you know, thinking about like black male prowess and
Right.
the way that sort of like, a prominent feature of like, you know, sort of a certain kind of threat in this history, you know, and like as we're seeing, like, you know, again, sadly played out like in these murders and shootings, you know, this fear, you know, so it's like just trying to unpack all of these things in like in the series of works that, you know, that I no longer make. So they're snakes.
Well, you know, the snake also in like a Kundalini mythology, like the snake is like the spine, you know, the energy it comes up from the spine.
Yeah.
So the snake it's multivalent in many different cultures, but it all has to do with power. The snake has to do with power.
Exactly. This piece right there, like in the show, I will say, opened in 2009, and right after the 2000, it opened in February 2009. I think the crash, the Great Recession, that whole thing happened in the fall of 2008, and in that show, none of the works sold. I sold nothing, you know, which didn't make my wife too happy. No, I'm joking. But ultimately, I sold this piece. We talk about power to a very, very, very wealthy collector, and it's like sequestered somewhere in his home, upstate. I'm not naming names. So I was very proud about that. I just want to point out also that I had a good friend when I didn't sell anything. It isn't always about sales. For those young folks who might be paying attention, you know, because it really is about like an investigation into sort of making stuff and, you know, trying to figure out how to do that, you know, in a way that like, you know, makes sense for you. You know, but sales and being able to support it comes in.
Maybe we can talk about, I think your dealer at the time was
Ronald Feldman.
Ronald Feldman. And I, you know, if we could just briefly touch on your relationship with him, because, you know, he's somebody who, you know, he showed Leon Golub, and like he never shied away from political subjects in the artists that he showed. I mean, he didn't exclusively show artists, you know, who derive a lot of their meaning from politics, but he was a kind of a tireless champion of political artists.
Yeah, he was. Just a little background. I first met Ronald Feldman, Ronald and Freda Feldman, I want to add, because they were a team,
Right.
Married in a team. And it's hard for me to separate the two of them, you know, and their business and their support. But I first met them in, I believe, 1991 or 2, 91. Yeah, and was in a show there early on. I was introduced to the person that introduced me, I believe, to Fong, which is former director Martina Batan, who I met through Roxy Payne at a space in Brooklyn at the time, which was called Sauce. And this was like right after the recession of the early 90s when I first moved to Brooklyn. But I met them early on. I was in a couple shows, and eventually they invited me to come on and be represented by them in 2000. So that's, I guess, 20 years now. 20 years ago. So, but they were, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, a little bit more of a backstory is I first walked when I was in graduate school at Yale University, we come up to New York and to do the rounds in Soho, and that was one of the galleries that we always stopped in. So like, I kind of had this early sort of, premonition about showing in the space. I think the first show I saw there was like, I always say that it was Joseph Beuys, but it might have been a different show, like Ilya and Amelia Kabakov. But I felt an immediate connection with the space. And then of course, like, learned about their politics later on. And so, but I literally envisioned myself with them from the outset. Now, how it happened is,
And now
amazing.
Now Ronald's retired, and they're not representing artists anymore.
Yeah, they moved on from representing,
right?
But they're going to keep the business going. The family is, I believe, but they're not representing artists anymore. But yeah, I just want to say that that was just like an amazing sort of formative experience for me. Like, I was a kid when I first started showing there. Right. I mean, relatively speaking, and have spent my entire career with them. And it was a really rich experience that like taught me a lot about just like, they gave me a lot of freedom to experiment and make, and it wasn't really rooted in like this kind of pressure of like produce and sell. They sold work, obviously, but they were just really supportive, and I mean, it's going to be hard. I miss that connection. There are people at times that were like, you should move on. They should move to Chelsea. They should, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, I saw so many amazing shows there, like the Komar and Melamed shows and the Kabakov shows and Leon shows. And I think they represented Nancy Spiro as well. I'm not sure.
I don't think they represented Nancy, but
I know she was represented by Lalong, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But like I said, Roxy Payne was there. He was somebody that I related to early, because we were like contemporaries. Right. And Bruce Pearson, Carl Fudge. These were all like Williamsburg-based artists. Right. I was based in Williamsburg. I did. By the way, I did my first solo show with Pierogi Gallery.
Really?
So wow. Joe Amaran. Yeah. So Joe is like really important, and it was like through that relationship that that I think solidified the thing with Feldman. I'm not going to get into the whole backstory, but
no, it's okay. Do you want to talk about this piece?
Yeah, this piece is titled Nigeria Power, and it's an octagon. I think that's the shape, and it's like Nigeria Power because the form in the center is the shape of the country, Nigeria, and it has the rays, black, gray, and silver, and it's like an explosion with limits.
Is this the first time you use the ray format, like in your, because it comes up again in your 167th Street murals in the subway?
That's a good question. This was 2000. Yeah, this is the first time. Excellent question.
We talked about this previously about being kind of like related to perspective and orthogonals, but you mentioned pointedly that the vanishing point is hidden.
Yeah.
And that's intentional.
Yeah. I mean,
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, there's always like, definitely intentional, but there's always like a backstory to everything. Like we don't just arrive at these things like with the snap of a finger. There's like these things. There's something that occurs. That leads to this, the thing that becomes the thing, for lack of a better way to put that. There's a progression. So
Right. I mean, as the maker, I mean, it just kind of happens organically, and one thing leads to the next. But I mean, if I could step into my critic's shoes, you know, the lack of a vanishing point for me relays the meaning of like indeterminacy. You know, like there's no determination, there's no ending. So the idea of indeterminacy is also something that's traditionally, or I shouldn't say traditionally, but it's connected to abstraction, like that it's open. You know, if you don't have a vanishing point, it's indeterminate and it's open.
Exactly.
So I think it's an interesting structural invention, you know, for that meaning.
Yeah, I didn't invent it, but
no, of course, no. But you know, but you
I knew you
that.
did. I know you didn't. I know you didn't mean that, but mean it that way. But yeah, I'm just being playful.
But I thought it was so interesting when you said it was, you know, that the vanishing point was obscured.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there was like a formal sort of like, you know, issue,
right,
if you will, that, to my earlier point, that I had to sort of work out for myself, because, and it just at some point made sense that, like, you know, that it was the case that the figure, you know, had to be sort of, had to obscure that, and that one would have to sort of imagine or complete the piece through one's imagination. Now, I've done things now that, like, you know, that are more transparent, but like I like the notion of, you know, because I mean, I think about those Baldessari pieces, you know, those early dot paintings, and like, you know, by like how, well, like how obscuring brings more attention to the subject, you know?
Right.
It makes you want to see the face even more, you know, so you're working. So it's like that process of trying to work that I think about, you know, for lack of a better way to put it, you know. So I don't like to tell people to work, although I tell my students all the time to work hard, and it's going to happen, you know. You just really have to put the work in. I know that sounds like really basic, but not in terms of like looking, not in terms of like sort of experiencing, like, you know, the work. You know, one has to do the work. You know?
Well, yeah. Well, you know, if you work too hard at it, you're going to lose a lot. You're not going to be listening. It's going to be an act of will rather than an act of perception. You know.
Exactly.
And you know, it's hard to tell young students, especially, you know, well, just, you know, kick back and it'll come to you, because they don't really have a track record, you know, and they don't have, like, they can't look back on their work and say, you know, this is what my work looks like, you know.
Yeah. So thus the work is in doing the work.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I think initially, you know, the work ethic is helpful in getting past that, you know, actually recognizing who you are.
Yeah.
But it does become an impediment, you know, like a determinist thinking, like any determinative thinking, it becomes an impediment to imagination.
Exactly.
So I think it's just fascinating that you're combining like literal information with this kind of structural irony that you're creating with your formal decisions.
Exactly.
So Catherine, oh yeah, okay. So do you want to talk about this? So this is more closely related to your murals in the Bronx, in the subway.
Yeah, you can switch ahead. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is a show at the Studio Museum in Harlem in 2017. It was like 10 years of these works on paper that I have been producing up to that point, and it's an ongoing project. And there's a lot that I can say about that. So these were works for figures that were figures and homages, an homage to each of these figures. In this case, this is Nina Simone, and they're simply titled after the person,
Right.
with a few like exceptions here and there. But yeah, so this is Nina, and sometimes in the series they repeat, different image, different layout. But this is Nina number 1, 2007, and it's again a very simple sort of graphic trope, color pencil on paper with the collaged figure, 22 by 30 inches, which is the standard format for these works. There's a very sort of meditative thing that I enjoy about making these works. There'll be a group in the show at Miles McKinnery, a new group of about 6 or so. You can advance to the next slide. Yeah, so this is like I say, an homage. Like I tend to think about, like I think a lot about like, the energy. Obviously, they're implying energy of the figure, but I'm also thinking about like a former iteration of the figure, or they're an homage because they've passed away, transitioned into the afterlife, so to speak. But this is Angela Davis, or Angela number 3, and so there's like 4 her. So, but we can get into that history. You can advance the image, actually. Maybe that works better. So obviously this is Malcolm X. It took me years. The first was 2 images of Nina Simone was 2007. I think Kathleen, or not Kathleen, but Angela Davis was 20. That was version was 2014, and this is Malcolm X, I believe, 2017. And it took me a lot of years to do a Malcolm X piece. But this piece is now at in the Malcolm X Center for Study at Wabash College in Indiana.
Excellent.
So I was really happy that I finally made one, and and it went to a place that is significant for the work, for the piece. But they're simple. They're simple.
Right.
I'm really trying to sort of again, just try to do something with the energy, trying to make reference to, without like being too like literal,
Right.
Reference to the cultural production, the politics, the history, legacy of the individuals depicted. So this gets back to this notion of like subjectivity and abstraction, this combination of the two,
right.
Which is something that, again, I took license. You were talking the other day about like, as it relates, and I don't want to sort of like put words in your mouth, but like, like this transgressive act to sort of move between these different spaces, these across media, to, so yeah, again, not my own invention, but, I found a way to make it my own. And I think that that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Like nothing's new under the sun, but I work to sort of, not own it, but just to sort of have it, I hope that there's a truth at the end of it, in it. And I think that that's the part that I hope that people get. That's what I get from work that has meaning and power for me. So that's what I hope that I'm doing as a maker, as an artist, which I think, go ahead.
I'm sorry. One thing I really respond to in your work, and if I may, it's like the same impulse. I have the same impulse to draw from like generic schema to kind of make something that's subjective. It might not be as explicit in my work, but for instance, like adopting the Pan-African colors, right? It's a ready-made schema that already has a symbolism built in, but you're not necessarily using it in a didactic way. You are, but you're not.
Yeah, and that's a term that, like, for me, like very early, like I was like, I had I tell my students all the time to don't be afraid of being goofy. But for some reason, I was afraid or concerned about being didactic. I don't want to be didactic or preachy, but you know, and I want there to be this kind of license. I mean, that sounds like don't mean to apologize, but you know, it's all work. It's all like a part of like the struggle to sort of figure out what it is that one's doing, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it makes me think of this Aaron Copland quote about, he's talking about compositions, and he said, you know, the composer doesn't know what they're doing until they do it, you know? Yeah. And you need to leave, or I shouldn't preach, but like one needs to leave kind of like an indeterminate vanishing point for themselves, you know, in order to get to those places where you make something new. But you don't know what it is before you make it.
Exactly. But if you make it enough, you begin to know, even when you don't know.
Exactly.
Like Philip Glass, he once described like, you know, the foggy field in that documentary that I watched like 9 million times. He's like talking about describing the foggy field and how like things begin to dissipate over time.
Right.
And you have a sense, you know, of what it is that you're doing, you know, over time. No, without knowing, I still don't know. I mean, don't tell my dealer, because I once said that in front of a group of students, Ronald, and he said, "What are you talking about? You know what you're doing." Like,
not good marketing.
I was like, no, I don't. You just have to accept that. But I do know what I'm doing, and to a certain extent. But
no, I mean, I've honestly said to people, like, you know, it's an intentional place to get to when I get to the studio, to not know what I'm doing, because I want to see something new, you know?
Exactly.
I'm not a slave to my style, you know?
Exactly.
Even if I determined it, it's like, I can do whatever I want, you know? It's like, but I might not know what that is.
Yeah. That last image, by the way, was Shirley Chisholm, for those of you who didn't know. It was Shirley Chisholm from, I think that was, I've done like 3 Shirley Chisholms. That's number 3 from 2018, I believe. So.
First Black woman to run for president.
The first Black woman to run for president.
First woman.
Yes.
I think.
Unbought, and unbossed.
Yeah. She was something else.
Exactly. She's a hero. Some would say shero. I just go with hero.
Outspoken and clarity.
Very crisp, very clear, very tough. Yes.
Okay, so let's move to the next one, Catherine.
Yeah. So this is a series of objects, paintings that I describe, titled panel paintings, and I just number them. You know, sometimes they're panel paintings in parentheses. There's a title, like in this case of the black and white piece to the left is panel painting number whatever, in parentheses power. So, and then the 1, 2 over, that's, you know, panel painting with the number. I don't have the numbers. And then it's celestial bodies in parentheses. So there's like some text, you know, and then to the 1 over from the left of power is wonder and light. So, but it's just a group of, you know, painted panels, stock lumber that I buy and then paint on. And I have some of those in the studio right now. But it's a series that it's I guess it's an ongoing series. And they're very totemic. We were talking about that, like the totemic, but I was thinking about, I'm thinking about a lot of things with these. I'm thinking about like sort of, you know, like African, you know, plank masks, shields. We were talking about John McCracken, you know, and the friend that described these as quote unquote African McCrackens. You know, but I really like that engagement between like the floor and the wall, you know, insofar as like this discussion around like an object versus a painting,
right?
You know, and really trying to sort of bridge that.
Yes.
There was pressure, a little bit of pressure from people who were interested in owning these as to whether or not they could just be on the wall. And so I did some attempts. I really just envisioned them as being on the floor and the wall.
Right.
Now, I did the show at the Armory, and we built a pedestal. I thought that was like a good sort of like resolution for the floor. People don't like the floor. I like the floor, but you know, the pedestal was nice. I put them on the wall, but I think I'm going to take them off the wall permanently, and they have to be on the floor.
Right.
Now you just have to figure out how to live with that if you want to, you know, own these. But fortunately, the people that own them, for the most part, have them on the floor.
Right.
Couple on the wall, but.
And we were also talking, Rico, the other day about your interest in figuration too. I mean, you're ostensibly working in an abstract, you know, mode, but you also made the point of saying, I'm really interested in the figure.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I was talking about like, you know, I'm always thinking about like bodies or the figure with the work. In the case of some of the throne pieces, I think one of those is going to come up. Not to jump ahead, but in this work, I was thinking about Louise Bourgeois, not specifically, but she's in the background and her personages for those totemic works that she did. But you know, yeah. So the figure, like both in the presence, its presence and absence. You know, in the case of the icon pieces, works. You know, clearly there's a figure. You know, who's passed and is being sort of honored or represented in a literal sense. But in the case of the throne number 2, the first iteration of this series was made in honor of a relative who had passed that year. And so I was literally thinking about like the absence, you know, but it's a chair. It's you know, it's a elevated chair, if you will, you know, and makes reference to very specific, you know, content. But in this case, the absence, you know, and so a lot of times in going back to even the auction block, clearly that like was a, you know, early, I had done like a few, that was probably the first series, to be honest, but I had done a few of those sort of purchase and thinking about like, you know, the soapbox or the stage, you know, or the auction block, you know, which all reference, you know, bodies or the figure. So, yeah.
Rico, I do want to have enough time for people to ask questions because they're always so interesting.
Yeah, this is a point in my slide presentation when I've talked too much where I never have to tell the slide person to advance the slides, but I just say that I'm going to move quickly through the last few slides. Bear with me, forgive me, but you know.
But so, I also wanted to touch on like your interest in music before you and I stop, you know, our discussion, because you mentioned specifically Albert Ayler.
Yes.
As an important, not necessarily influence, but inspiration.
Definitely inspiration and influence, and yeah, but definitely inspiration. Albert Ayler and other jazz musicians, you know, but this is the whole long discussion about like sort of, you know, like, you know, abstraction versus subjectivity.
Yes.
In the case of music, like, you know, like, you know, some of the experimentation, getting out to the fringe of, you know, sort of melody, you know, and, you know, and moving into the spiritual. We didn't talk about spirituality either, which for me is like that's a key component of the work, you know, transcendentalism, not in the formal sense, but like, you know, trying to sort of express, you know, things through like pattern, which is also like vibration. We're looking at this piece in front of us, you know, which is it has a lot of vibration, you know, but it also has like, you know, so it's both concrete, you know, and sort of like not concrete, you know. That's how I kind of see, you know, the switch between these positions, you know, like you're here and then you're gone, you know what I mean? It's like you're present and you're absent, you know.
Well, relative to that, you know, after you mentioned Albert Ayler, I looked up some of his music, and there's, I think in the link I provided John, there's a a piece called Ghost.
Yep.
Speaking of like atavism and spirituality.
Yep.
And what I noticed, and this is not unusual, like the jazz, firmament, but in Ghost and specifically, there's kind of like a march. It sounds like a pop song. It starts off like a fragment of a pop song, and then it moves into this long improvisation. And then there's a reprise of the fragment of the pop song. So it's not unlike, you using so-called pure abstraction in conjunction with referential imagery. It's kind of the same thing. It encloses both the pop referential imagery with the improvisation. Doesn't necessarily make a binary separation between the two. So I think that was really interesting to see that, that the correlation between your work and Albert Ayler. Obviously, his friend John Coltrane did that too, and so did Miles. Miles did that, and many other people. But do you see that as a direct analogy in how you might work?
I wouldn't say it's direct, but of course, I've absorbed the energy, the music, all of those musicians, like Miles to Coltrane. He was Albert Ayler was a protege. Coltrane, like Eric Dolphy, Alice Coltrane, Ornette Coleman,
Right.
Definitely, Thelonious Monk, yeah.
Ayler's interesting though, because he was kind of like out there, he was like Godolphy or Don Cherry, like he was really out there in terms of his.
Yeah, at the beginning.
He had problems with the record company, because he wasn't making popular music.
Exactly. Yeah, and eventually came back to it, but then, his life ended very tragically and, early.
Yeah, I think he drowned in the East River, like suicide, maybe.
Yeah, there's a question, but
nobody knows. Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the things. One of the pieces that I'm going to have in my show at Miles McKinnery is, titled Ghosts after Albert Ayler, and I think that for me it's very apropos to the moment. Again, I don't think that there's a one-to-one connection, in what I'm about to describe, but I think that we're always sort of on the psychic level, spiritual level, sort of trying to process, some of this, some of the things that, especially now,
Yes.
I think they were at 180,000 people who've passed away from COVID and climbing. Yeah. So I think that I literally see that, is spirits, for what, why, and so then it becomes they're, again, I hate to present this literally, but ghosts, you know what I mean? There's I hope they,
Well, you have this very real phenomenological thing happening, and then at the same time you have this virtual spectacle happening. It's just it's such a,
yeah,
such a weird time because the spectacle in relation to the phenomenological reality of all the deaths is just the gap is so obvious.
Exactly. The image advancer, you can just go ahead and press the button. Keep pressing until we're done.
That would be Catherine Olson.
Catherine, yes, Catherine. So these are all works from 2018. More the panel paintings, and then this piece is the title escapes me at the moment. But just keep advancing, because how much time do we have left? 10 minutes?
No, we usually go to around 2:30 with questions, but the questions are great. So I want to give them, not to give you short shrift, but give the.
This is Untitled Pulsar Raves, and this is there'll be a series of paintings all on prefab doors, and so I started working on the doors in 2018. So there's a whole discussion around the use of the doors as a material. Again, my object making background has not allowed me an opportunity to work on canvas yet. But if I do, I'll work on canvas or panel-backed canvas.
No, I understand that decision because I work on wood as well for that same reason. The objecthood of the painting is just as important to me as the optics.
Is the objects, or yeah, optics, yes.
Right.
So keep going. Yeah, this is a piece titled, it's a little kind of, sort of a study, but this is just Untitled Harriet, after Harriet Tubman. But I was going to say, The Doors, I'm working on a series of pieces at Miles McKinnery, and one of the pieces is titled Ghosts, after Albert Eiler. And I'm describing the shapes as a series of kind of like auras or energy. So
it's a wonderful piece. I mean, the music piece, and I look forward to seeing the show.
Yeah, me too. After we win the White House.
So Catherine, yeah.
So this is just in the last few years I've done like been fortunate to be invited to realize some public works. This project was on a very not so interesting building in West Palm Beach. It's a parking garage. It's titled The Mountaintop, and so I saw I was really responding to the architecture, but also the shape, the triangle, which has become like a form that's in the work a lot currently. I mean, I've been doing triangles for a while, but the triangle is has a lot of like sort of like symbolic meaning for me, some of which I won't get into. But it's like it's a symbol of both good and evil, depending on its position. But also like I want to make loose reference to like things again related, connected with history, i.e. the triangle trade or slave trade,
right?
The right slave route.
Yes.
But it's also like the Trinity, in the literal sense. But I saw this series of triangles on this building, with spaces. Negative space is like this sort of like range, just given the scale, and then that led me to thinking about like the peak and mountaintop. As in Martin Luther King's last speech, the mountaintop, and it actually opened on. We were able to arrange it that it opened on the Dr. The holiday. So yeah, you can advance. And then this project, Beacons, which opened a few weeks prior to the last piece in the Bronx at 167th Street on the Grand Concourse, which is also as many of you know, the Bronx Museum stop. And this is just a series that was an outgrowth from the Icon series. I was thinking Beacons, obviously, for, I mean, the title sort of says as much as anything. There are 8 mosaics, murals on the north and south platform. And some of the subjects are, in this case, Maya Angelou, James Baldwin, Audre Lorde, Gil Scott-Heron, and Celia Cruz, Tito Puente, Reggie Jackson. It's one stop up from the Yankee Stadium, so I had to get Reggie Jackson in there. And I watched him hit, the 3 home runs in the 1977 World Series. And then there's like Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who's from the Bronx. James Baldwin went to DeWitt Clinton. James Baldwin and Gil Scott-Heron both went to DeWitt Clinton High School in the Bronx. And so these are all people who are not necessarily from the Bronx, but have, significance there and internationally. But it's literally thinking about the light passing through the space, light or the energy passing from the figures, and that, would be the light that illuminates our way through this mess that we're in.
I love the format. I love the mosaic format for these particularly iconic imageries. It just adds another kind of a historic level of facture,
Yeah. Yeah, produced by, I want to say, the great Stephen Mioto of Mioto Mosaics, based in Carmel, New York. If you ever do a mosaic, I highly recommend that you work with Stephen.
Unbelievable.
By himself, he's light. You know.
Amazing.
And thank you to the MTA Arts and Design, and for those panelists who selected me. One of my proudest moments ever, and they say it's permanent. So, if you haven't been able to make it up to the Bronx to see this project and others, please, when you can, when it's safe, make the trip. And it will be at some point very soon.
So Rico, would you like to go to questions now?
No, I'm joking. Of course I would.
Okay, so why don't we open it up to questions?
Awesome. We can definitely do that. Rico.
Thank you. You know, if I don't get a chance to thank you, Rico, this
No,
is
thank you, Tom, for doing this for your, yes.
Awesome. Thank you both. Rico, I lived in the Bronx when I first moved here, and it was always a pleasure to see those mosaics.
Oh, cool. Excellent.
And seeing that James Baldwin, like, I feel like we've seen his face being backlit on social media so many times in the last few months, and I'm sure that his literal light is truly, I think, guiding a lot of people forward right now. So very prescient of you putting it that way.
Thanks.
Got a bunch of questions. Our first one's going to come from the artist Lisa Beck. Lisa, I'm going to activate your microphone now, so you'll be able to, or I guess I'm going to ask you to. Yes, let's see, you should be good. Lisa, yes, hi.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Really been enjoying this discussion. My question just concerned the color choices that you make, because they're very specific, and I know you mentioned about the early work talking about the Confederate flag, and I'm always really drawn to these secondary and tertiary colors that you get into. Just aesthetically, I like them, but I'm imagining I'm wondering, I'm asking, are there other criteria about what you choose, what you're working with now?
Yeah, I mean, I would always say that the color palette most recently was more kind of starting with like a sort of a Pan-African, palette, but then, but it's also really intuitive. I don't do it. I started like recently mixing, but again, I don't come from a background of like, where I've done a lot of like mixing of color. I usually take things straight from the tube. Sometimes I buy mixed colors, so there's a really intuitive part of it that, is important for me, and I know that sounds like a little bit like maybe a little sketch, but I do like, I like to be consistent through, like I like the idea, because I've been working with like, a limited palette recently black is always present,
Right.
I love black. I wanted to say earlier, I want to make reference to Louise Nevelson, and her sort of, love for that color. Obviously use of the color and how she described the color is like sort of possessing all of the colors. So like, so for me, black, or Kerry James Marshall, the way that he uses black, so it's both like symbolic and literal, it's like the thing that sets off everything, wasn't always the case. I did a project in 2013 when I first started making the panels that didn't have black, but, did it? I might be like, but it wasn't as prominent as I think it is now. So black is like the number one color that I always like. need. And then I work around that. So then it's like orange or yellow, green, red, and then orange. And then I've been using like medium magenta and purple. And a really good friend of mine, very smart person, said, well, why don't you like lighten some of the colors to create more of a mid-tone kind of thing. So, you know, that's something that I'm thinking about. So it's really like, I like to describe my painting as me just stumbling through and just trying to figure out what to do. It's very intuitive, you know, until like, you know, it isn't, you know, and I'm getting more like more and more sort of confident, you know, in how I work. You know, thank you for your question. I have a great deal of respect and reverence for your work, and you're an artist that I, you know, look to, you know, in terms of like work and experimenting and you know, so yeah, I just want to say that. So thank you for what you do. Yes. Is that it? Or hopefully I answered your question.
Thank you. We got more. We have more. Our next question is coming from Malvika, who Malvika,
Right here.
have the ability to turn your microphone on. Right on.
Ta-da! I also wanted to echo what JC was saying, Mr. Gatson. It's such a privilege to have you here. I've lived like really close to the Studio Museum the better part of my 20s. And right when I moved over here, you had some work up, and then I feel like I've kept seeing your aesthetic and like your kind of signature work, like on the subway in Basira Khan's show, is the show you had with Basira Khan. I just feel like it's like so phenomenal to get to hear the full narrative, and just like a real pleasure to have you here. So thank you. But
Thank you.
Question.
Yep.
Yeah, my question is, I was wondering if you could speak a little more about your relationship to the Studio Museum, especially because you've had such a long history with them. You were notably in Thelma Golden's like freestyle, and
Yep.
with your retrospective a couple years back, 3 trips around the block. And I guess I was wondering what role you feel the Studio Museum plays in cultural production in New York or Black cultural life, but mainly I just know there's something truly special going on over there. So many people come through the Studio Museum, and I was wondering if you could shed some light and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to have like a long relationship with the Studio Museum going back to freestyle and just prior, and with Thelma and some of the other curators there, and a lot of the artists who, you know, are obviously friends who've come through the AR program and so on. And really happy that you got to see that show and there. And with, you know, that was a really important exhibition for me, you know. So I'm like, you know, was honored to sort of be able to, you know, to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think that like their significance is, you know, culturally is pretty obvious, you know. It's like, you know, early on a very important institution, you know, championing like the work of artists, the work of artists of color, Black artists, you know. I believe it was established in 1969. I mean, not to give the history, but, you know, I've been fortunate that they have several works in the collection, you know. But I believe, you know, I think that my work was introduced to them when Thelma saw Golden, deputy director, saw a show that I had, and this is going back a bunch of years. So, you know, if I misquote Thelma, if you're watching, I apologize. But I believe she saw a show that I did at Ronald Feldman Fine Art. I believe it was my first show in 2000. And I was invited to apply for the ARR program. And I did so, and didn't get in. So I was like, whoa, you know. So actually, tell a funny story. I'm not going to tell now, but I got a call from the curator at the time, Christine Y Kim, who's now at LACMA. And I was like, this is prior to hearing if I got into the ARR program. So I thought it was a call that was going to tell me either way. But it was a call inviting me to take part in a show that she was organizing down in Dumbo called The Light Show. And this was in 2000, I believe. And so I didn't get in, but I got into that show and I got introduced to Christine. And I knew that I was on Thelma's radar at that point. And then as a result, I eventually was invited to take part. I got a studio visit from Christine, and when she was doing studios, organizing the freestyle show, and I got into freestyle, and that, it's just a really, really important exhibition. So, yeah, so I think that they're like, their significance is obvious, and I think they're hopefully things are moving forward, on not so. Well, hopefully they'll be able to sort of open up the newly designed building on schedule, but who knows with the pandemic and everything. But so yeah, I mean, I think that I, like most, hope that their future is solid and set, and but their legacy, of course, is and it's just been really important to me. Like, I just think of all the artists that have come through there, that program and that have shown, it's like crazy. And I happen to be in that show with freestyle with like, I mean, amazing household names now, Mark Bradford and Julie Mehertu and Trenton Doyle Hancock and yeah, so many. So Sanford Biggers. So yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll get into your question.
I don't know, did I answer your question? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I mainly just wanted to hear you riff on the Studio Museum and tell us some stories. So this was perfect.
I mean, I love studios.
Yeah.
They're like been so important, like,
yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Our next question comes from a regular Sergio. Sergio, I'm gonna ask to activate your microphone. Oh, or I can read it also if you prefer. Yeah.
It's all the same.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, JC. It's just a silly question. It's just based on your first response. It seems, I might have gotten the wrong impression, but it seems like when talking about your palette, you're a little casual about it. And I had noticed in the first piece that was shown that there is this very cool effect of different depth that happens. Like the colors sometimes seem to sink or levitate, and I thought that was a completely, like a purposeful effect. And I don't know, based on your original question, I don't know if that was more like a happy accident, or if you actually meant to just create this depth just with the combination of colors that, I don't know, it was just that.
No, that's a great question. I mean, I don't mean to give the impression that that it's completely casual. Like this presentation, like there are limits. So I'm not talking about work that, other work that I've done. Like we've been very specifically focused on like the painting, if you will, but this video work that I had done just prior, like if you utilizing like the mirror filter, this filter that gets flipped and then things move, and then I would quarter it. So like things like, so it take advantage of like the pans, or any movement. So it could be like really sort of expansive, and depending on how the movement of the camera was in the original footage. So like that piece, Southern Comfort, I was, and there was a lot of intuitive parts of it, but I was trying to sort of create that effect as a painting, and it never lived up to the actual film, because it's just hard to achieve. But that was one of the things that I was struggling with and sort of finally just gave over to, you know? So it was like, so, but I don't mind the sort of intentional, unintentional sort of things that may occur in the process of making, because this is, I mean, like there are things that I do that are very intentional. Like they're like, boom, that's what I want to do, execute it, it's done. I try to avoid that just for the purpose of keeping it interesting for myself. Not avoid, maybe there's a better word. I'm not as interested in that. I'm more interested in like the way that like the intuitive or the subconscious works. So that things occur that we're not so much in control of. So I always like to say that I'm not trying to preach like any of this, but I'm sourcing from things that are very loaded, very heavy, and like, and beautiful, you know? So I want all of that to be in the work, but, you know, like if I move from like, say, the 3 basic colors in like the sort of Pan-African spectrum, you know, or the, you know, like black, red, and green. If you just take black, red, and green, so then what happens? So once you know, move from that and begin to sort of introduce like, I mean, and sadly, in my case, a very incremental way, like colors that don't seem to fit within like that realm. And so like it's little things like that that keep me interested in, you know, the process of making. But the effects are, you know, I mean, can be both happenstance, you know, and literal or intentional, right. You know. But I don't, you know, you know, I don't always like the intentional. I'm just working. I like to say that I'm working, and it's like through the work where like these other things enter into it, you know, as beautiful moments, happy accidents, you know, but it's a very intentional way of working, but the result might be beyond.
Right,
I'm looking at a painting now that I love, but I just don't think anybody else is gonna love it. And it's not because it's like the most complicated thing that's ever been produced, right. You know, or the most like layered and powerful thing. But I love it because it's like, it challenges me. You know, and I think that artists like are, I'm not gonna show you because, but you know, but I look at it and I'm just constantly looking at these things and saying like, well, what is it that, you know, so there's this dialogue that's happening, and like I'm like, where are you going? Like, where do you want to go? How can I sort of help you get there? You know, are you there? Sometimes they just say, I'm there, you know, I'm done, you know, but sometimes I'm just looking for a long time. And I try to set up the studio such that I can do that, you know, that I make things, I can look at them for a long time. I just always work. I try not to work towards stuff. I just try to work, try to make stuff. And so, yeah.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
That might have gone left field a little bit. Forgive me. Thank you for your question. Any more?
There you go. Yeah, we've got a couple more. This one is from Karen Schifano, and I'm going to read it on Karen's behalf. The question for Rico is, did you look at and do you connect with David Hammond's big wall floor pieces and their theatricality? Do you think of your sculptural objects as props at all?
I actually think a lot about the objects as props. Yeah. I would say yes. I haven't really thought about that in a while, especially because I'm doing the paintings. But yeah, I mean, there is like I wouldn't say the leaning panels is so much, but some of the earlier sculptures, you know, especially some of the things we saw today, there is like that prop like element. Yeah, which also references theater, I suppose. But yeah, there is that. There was a period when I was thinking very specifically that way. The question about David Hammond's notwithstanding, I'm probably not going to be able to answer that question. But yeah, that would be yes.
Thank you. Karen, I hope you're there to hear that. And for our last audience participation will be from our publisher and your friend, Fong. I'm going to ask you to activate your microphone.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Rico. Thank you, Tom, for lively conversation and learning more about your work. You know, you can't really take for granted just because we're friends, you know?
Yes, exactly.
I just sit down and blend and talk and take it in time slowly and talk about things that we really love and care about. So you mentioned earlier the issue of spirituality, Rico. Definitely, it's very strong in your work. Not just referring to certain, form, whether totemic form or mantra, in a way you use in the subway piece, for example, which is what you got to be known early on. But there's also a certain, I would say, social cultural anthropology. There's certain rigor that have to do with ethnographic, referencing to even, I would dare to say, Afro-Caribbean or Afro-diaspora. I'm talking about Santeria and voodoo, magic. There's certain kind of magic that relate to the separation between the spirit and the soul, at the same way that we refer to religion on one hand and spirituality on the other hand. So what is being mourned, what is being celebrated. And I think that is a subversive quality in your work. But I'd like to hear you elaborate more on that aspect.
Yeah. I mean, it's so I like the way that you made a delineation between like religious and spiritual, because it's not religious, although it's could be rooted in the sort of like, certain aspects of religion, like again, like, just the way that artifacts function within like the sphere or the space of the church and so on. But, the spiritual for me is like really, like I make reference to, like specific kind of things, like I use the like voodoo, or African religion, but it's more like a sort of knowing, it's more like a kind of like an amalgam of many things, but it's just like, playing with, I hesitate to use play in terms of speaking about something, the sacred, but there is something sacred, like attempting to sort of make something that is like an object that functions a certain way. It's like one receives something, but the spiritual is like the person. The spiritual is like the energy, the transference of that energy, through the maker into the object, you know what I mean? And everything that embodies, I mean, literally, both in the physical and, the psychological, the, what's the word? So everything that means, like we're living, breathing creatures. So we're spiritual, we're communicating, you know what I mean? Consciousness, like the notion that we, we're consciously all gathered here in this virtual space, connecting, talking, answering questions, but but that is if you look at that phenomenologically, that's like this, you break that down, it's like, it's spiritual. We're here. We certainly have, we talk about having a soul, or whatever. I mean, I know that that's different in different cultures, but the soul, I think the soul is universal. But the notion of something that we can't see, that's like the abstract. But I'm literally talking about the energy that it takes to move whatever comes through me as a conduit into the world as something. And then it takes the viewer to sort of complete that,
Yes.
Like some people might say it's spiritual. And I don't mean art historically. There's all spirituality all through the ab expression, all different movements of spirituality and ways of talking about, the spirituality, the sacred object, cubism, it's messing with all of that. It's like taking, like, thinking about what it means that, that certain artists took, like, and sort of produced like this really important work, so-called the most important work in, the last century and beyond, that came through, like, sort of like this primitive production, you know, this work that possessed all of this energy, you know. But that's powerful for me, like Hilma Off Klimt, you know, the artists I talk, Emma Kuntz, you know, you know, I talk in my lecture, I didn't include it here, like, you know, again, Coltrane, you know, Albert Eiler, you know, like people that came literally through like the, you know, the Black church, you know, and arrived at, you know, this work that they were doing that was it was pushing out and expanding, you know, awareness of like a certain kind of you know, way of being spiritual, you know. And I think that that's what artists do. They take, you know, they have to find a way to make a license, because like I said, I made reference earlier about like we're ultimately not just making, you know, these, you know, commodities, these objects, you know, hopefully, I mean, things sell, they're on the wall, they can be easily owned, but you know, that's not what I think about when I'm like really in here working. So, you know, I hope that there is a part that is, you know, all of the things that I'm attempting to describe without being too specific. Now, if I get specific, then I have to get into, you know, my own personal stuff, and I don't want to go there.
You know, but it's interesting because when Kandinsky wrote that book, it's so concerning to the spirituality in art, remember? So that's early on, as much as he was a member, just like McLean, you know, that whole incredible group that belonged to Theosophy, Madame Blavatsky. So it was a time in the turn of the century where artists was trying to explore a new way of getting away from the Western canon, particularly.
Looking.
Exactly. So my point was that maybe perhaps you mentioned humor too again, and I was thinking of how, for example, even in the music, you know, let's say you take the blues, Delta blues, and I know that when it went to the north, to Chicago, to the migration, and then when record or thing was getting recorded, record was made and get disseminated, and when it got all the way to Africa, you know, those musicians over there, like Ali Touré and people like that, beginning to take back that sound because it came from there. So it's really, you know, come around the whole circle in a way. So I think there's that dimension which emanate in your notion of spirituality. And what is spirit? Spirits had to be created to generate energy to protect the soul.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you, Rico.
Thank you. That was beautiful, by the way. I could go another 30 minutes just back and forth with discussing that, but yeah, just these notions of like, you know, reclaiming, you know, this energy. You know, that's one of the things I was trying to make reference to with like, I always talk about with the magic sticks, you know, with these forms, these sort of like, you know, modernist sort of really rigid forms that are on pedestals and like, you know, but, you know, trying to like sort of, you know, or even like talking about the symbols, you know, like the swastika or the cross, and like trying to make like clear, like, you know, the meaning behind these things, you know, or masks, or, you know, the utility in some of these objects, you know, insofar as spirituality, but then also just like, you know, I mean, they're spiritual because I made them.
Yeah.
You know, that's the intent. That's the, you know, I'd like to say that again, there's an intentionality behind the making that I don't know that the viewer, you know, I hope that the viewer, you know, receives that. And I think that, you know, yeah, I hope that they do.
Okay.
But anyway, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Rico.
For inviting me. I love doing it. I want to thank everybody for showing up, and hopefully it wasn't too boring.
No, right.
Not at all.
You, JC.
Yes. Thank you, Vaughn, for that question. Also, there's a bunch more that we could talk about. I know I would love to get more into the way that jazz influences your work, but it is the end of lunch, and at the Rail we have a tradition of finishing our lunches with a poem, as many of you know. We've carried this tradition into our community events, and we are thrilled to welcome the poet Don Yorty to the stage today. Don, sorry, I'm just gonna activate Don's microphone. Don is a poet, an educator, and a garden activist. I don't know what that is, but I'm excited to find out. He's the author of 2 poetry chapbooks and is included in Out of This World, an anthology of poetry of the St. Mark's Poetry Project, 1966 through 1961. His collected early poems will be published in 2021, which is next year. Don, you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
You can.
Yep.
Good, good. This has been a great afternoon. Rico, I love your work. And I have a blog, donyordy.com.
Okay.
And I love featuring artists on the blog. So let's maybe do something. I really love the portraits, the homages. It's like rays of light coming out. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And those panels are to die for. They are really, really great.
Thank
So,
you.
and it was just very great to see you, hear you. Now I'm going to be short and sweet because we're going on here into the afternoon. I've been spending a couple days now. I'm writing postcards, and the postcards say your vote equals your voice. And then on the back, I'm writing, promoting 2 congressmen, state congressmen from Pennsylvania who are going to Harrisburg, who are in districts that are very, very Republican. You go through these districts and you see Confederate flags flying. You see all these fucking Trump signs and all this stuff. So I'm writing 500 postcards. Everybody, we got 2 fucking months here. Do something. We really got to do something. It's scary as shit. Okay, I'm just going to read 4 poems. And I have, I was going to do something else and I decided not to. And one thing I do is poetry postcards. So I'm going to read 4 poetry postcards, and it'll be short and sweet. I loved the afternoon here. I loved seeing all of the work. So here we go, poetry postcards. Now, good, I can see this. So it's a haiku. I am here with you, but what is even better, you are here with me. So that's a haiku that I wrote. Somebody asked me to write a haiku and I was very nervous about it. Oh my God, I can't write a haiku. I don't. And then I wrote a haiku, and that was that. Now, here's a very early poem that I wrote, which is going to be in my early collected poems, which is going to be called Fucking and Other Poems, which is going to be out sometime in 2021. When sleep vanishes, then you swim. Awake is no island, merely swift stroke and breath. The moon is not the sun's skull. Day is not what night forgets. I don't know if you guys are seeing that backwards or not. But anyway, kind of, there are drawings there. So if it's backwards, you're going to hear me talking and you can try to read them backwards. I printed this one and I was running out of ink. So the little flower there has this sort of striated thing, which it's not supposed to actually be there. This will also be in the 2021 Fucking and Other Poems. I'm not sure exactly when it's coming out, but oh, pretty self. A snake curled in the sun feels my shadow come and goes, ripples over stones. The stream falls down and oozes out of moss and mud where a deer stepped. No, I won't pick this violet. Let it clutch the cracking rock, blue out of yellow from a black dot. When I leave these woods to work and stammer or say 2 words at once, I'll think of it and stop. So, and I'm going to read one more poetry postcard. I got a whole lot of them, but I'm just going to do 4. And so here's the last one. I write sonnets. I started writing sonnets in 2003, shortly after the invasion of Iraq. And I felt very helpless because I was really, really, really against the whole damn thing. And I decided, I was in the mountains visiting my parents in the South Mountain in Pennsylvania where I grew up. And I just started to write sonnets, and it was kind of a protest against the war, and it was just trying to control something, and the sonnet has a form, and it was just, you know, doing all this kind of stuff. So I used to teach in China, actually in Wuhan, which has been in the news lately. Beautiful city. It's bigger than New York, and nobody ever heard of it till there was a pandemic. But so I taught in China, and here's the last poem I'm going to read. It's a postcard, and I just put this one together, so it's my most recent poetry postcard. You are the flower, and I am the grass, the young man says to the young woman. I am the flower, and you are the grass, the young woman says to the young man. You are a bird, and I am a fish. I'm the kite, and you're the wind. Difficult as it is, a Chinese couple with eyes closed kiss. Sorry, with eyes closed sit. It used to be kissed, and I put sit there. It's still kind of kissed in my mind. Difficult as it is, a Chinese couple with eyes closed sit, forgetting they are opposites on a stone step, so passionately kissing. That's where the kissing comes in now. So passionately kissing, they don't see the kite in the tree or me who writes, nor do they know what they begin might end at any moment. The crazy man lies down by the Tai Chi dancer as dad kicks the ball, his boy runs after. So those are some poetry postcards, and I'll be short and sweet. I really enjoyed this afternoon. Your work is really, really great. Check out my blog, my blog, donyori.com, and it would be great to put you on there. There's all sorts of poets and artists who are on my blog.
I will.
So thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this. I love your work.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Don.
Thanks for reading. I love your poems.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Those were beautiful. And Rico and Tom, thank you so much for today's conversation. As you all know, we're here every day. So you can find us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation between the artist Ursula Reitingsvard, art editor Amanda Guglielmizzi, and editor-at-large Jason Rosenfeld, both familiar faces. And I will give everyone the ability to activate their microphones. So feel free to say goodbye on your way out. And
hi everybody that I know that I didn't say hi to, who's on here, David and Ingrid and Andrew and everybody. I see you all. Sean. Yes.
Bye all. Okay.
Thank you, Don, for that.
Don, thank you so much for those
thanks.
incredible poems.
Thanks, Rico. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
so
Thank you,
much.
Rico.
Don. Thank you, Rico.
Thanks,
Great
JC.
poems, Don.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Love you all.
Stay
Thanks,
wearing
Rico.
backwards.
Bye, guys.
Perfect.
Everybody be safe, and someday in the future,
Hey,
all be
I
together.
can't wait to come and visit you.
Yes, Rico. Can't wait to see that show at Miles.
Everyone,
November 19th.
Rico, thanks, Tom.
Miles McHenry Gallup.
Thank you.
Bye.
Days.
Hi, Lynn.
Thank
Thanks so much,
Guys,
everyone.
thank you so much.